Welcome to Outside the Box. I'm your host, Grant Pruitt. I'd like to thank our wonderful producer, Zach Lewis.
Oh, thanks, Grant.
We have a great show for you today, folks. Really excited about this. You know, it's a business-oriented show, and nothing greater than people that deal with businesses. I'm very fortunate to have my guest here. This is Biegel Macaraeg. I have Tucker McCormick as well. Hopefully you can see him. Wave to everybody, Tucker. Hi.
Oh, we can see him. Yeah, he's on
great.
camera.
You're on camera, even if it wasn't candid. They're with HarloKyn Advisers today, and it's a real treat to have them on our show. Biegel, can you share with us kind of what you do, what HarloKyn is, and what you look for?
Absolutely. First, thank you very much for having us on the show. It's an honor to be here. Basically, at HarloKyn, we do two things. On the one hand, we work with lower middle market companies.
Now, can you define lower middle market for us, just so that everybody's on the same page?
A company, at the end of the day, their overall enterprise value somewhere in the $10 to $25 million range.
Right.
What that really means for earnings, anywhere from $2 to $5, maybe $7 million of EBITDA, somewhere in that universe. We have a focus here in Texas and in surrounding states. So we really want to be involved in companies that support our economy, who are owned and managed, or people that work there are our friends, our neighbors, people that we are in our neighborhood, as I mentioned, that we go to our kids go to the same schools, that sort of outlook.
And you're a little bit different than a lot of your competition in that, you know, you kind of get two different facets. We were talking about that a little before the show. You have really, really big banks like your Goldman Sachs, your JP Morgans, et cetera, that are selling huge companies. Mm-hmm. And then you have business brokers that are out there, and I know you're going to cringe when I even bring that up, but, you know, I think it's important to point that out because I talk to people all the time that say, you know, I'm looking at selling my business, I'm looking at buying business, I'm talking to business brokers, and oftentimes it's you know, a $100,000 company, a $200,000 company. Not that they're not a good business, but you know, there's a disconnect between, call it $200,000 and $100 million. Is that the case?
The just to further clarify what we do, I said that we do two things. The second thing that we do is we make direct investments ourselves, typically in early stage companies, really looking at technologies or companies or ideas that are really focused in helping enhance our everyday living.
Okay.
That's a big universe. We're trying to figure out where we want to play in that, but that's generally how we like to deploy our capital.
Now, will you partner with anybody else that you're representing from the buy side or the sell side since you do direct investment?
We don't want to compete with our clients who are investors.
Okay.
If there's an opportunity to participate in one of their deals, they're making an acquisition, we'll certainly be open to that conversation, but never want to be in a position that our capital is competing against somebody else's capital.
Great.
And typically in the early stage company where we're even a seed round, we don't really run into that sort of conflict around our middle market advisory strategy.
Okay.
But to answer your question, there certainly is a big discrepancy in terms of the process, helping to manage the sale of a $100,000 company versus a $100 million company. The one thing that owners in both companies, they face the same challenges in managing their businesses, have to answer the same questions, just on a different scale. So when it comes to the sell side strategy, same challenges, just a different scale. But in terms of the process, a very big difference. You're certainly going to see a lot more larger private equity, certainly, and even strategic interest in companies of the $100 million size. It's just it's going to move the needle for someone. I think that with 600, 700 billion of private equity dry powder in the market that's only been raised in the last 2 years, there's a lot of buy side fundamentals.
And that 600 or 700 million, is that
billion? Yes.
Excuse me. Is that strictly middle market as you defined it, or is that across everything?
Across everything.
Okay. All right. So this is everything from your Fortune 100s to your $100,000 businesses, like we were talking about.
Well, what that represents is companies or investment, private equity investors who do everything from the venture capital stage all the way through the large cap buyout firms that everybody reads about in the Wall Street Journal. If you follow that universe, the Carlyles of the world,
Sure.
the KKRs of the world that have very big war chests to go out and make big acquisitions.
Right. So as far as your expertise, you're playing, you talked a little bit about EBITDA, you talked about enterprise value, for as far as, kind of bringing it down a level,
Mm-hmm.
as far as sales, typical business, is that a $20 million in sales company and up? How would you define that from a sales
from
standpoint?
a revenue standpoint?
Right.
We will work with and have seen and looked at anywhere from $5 to $25 million in
Okay.
revenue.
So
typically.
5 to 25 million. So these are good, healthy American businesses located in and around the state of Texas.
Correct.
Okay. And as far as this space, I would imagine you're a breath of fresh air to a lot of these people, because you really do take more of an advisory role than what some of these other groups out there are doing.
I think that what we try to do is, and why we started the firm, or why I started the firm 2 years ago, in the lower middle market, as we've defined it, there's a lot of great companies and a lot of very smart and motivated shareholders, founders, and managers of these companies that, because of the size of their company, don't necessarily have the access to a quote-unquote professionalized process to help manage the sale, or looking at other strategic alternatives for their company.
So when you say other strategic alternatives, can you clarify what you mean by
Sure.
that? Because you're not just selling businesses, right?
Correct. I think that to answer your other question, you don't just parachute in and become someone's trusted advisor.
Sure.
I think it takes a lot of time and looks very different from company to company to figure out what it is that the shareholders or the founders really want to do. And I think that on average, a lot of the opportunities that we are fortunate enough to be part of, or at least get a look at, are companies that have been founded and been in business 30 plus years, maybe less, maybe a little bit more. The founder has reached an age where he or she says, gosh, I've built this business. What are my options? And I think what we try to do is learn about what it is that they want to do, certainly learn about what the company does, and just lay out at a high level, here's a roadmap, or here are what you might consider as far as a sale, a majority recap. In other words, selling a majority of the company to an institutional investor, potentially a minority investment, or even in some instances, a debt recapitalization. In other words, borrowing, using the company's balance sheet to help monetize a bit of your equity, take some risk off the table. All and in addition to potentially joint ventures with larger strategic partners. So many different kinds of options that might be available that the founders may not have considered. So,
anybody that's paid attention to this podcast knows that I love history. So, how did you get to this? How did you come up with this idea? I mean, other than just seeing a need and an opportunity, tell us a little bit about your background.
So my background, 20 plus years, has always been in the deal business, certainly supporting on the credit side, larger middle market buyouts, either at a regulated lender all the way to non-bank finance companies. And I think that more recently than that, I think I spent a few years with the boutique investment bank, really operationally focused, and really enjoyed what we were trying to accomplish there, especially working with founders and shareholders to help companies that perhaps needed a little bit more operational direction,
Right.
and really focused our strategy based on the operations of a company, which is certainly different from a lot of other.
Well, and it's hard for a lot of founders to be focused on the operations of a business.
That's what they often are very close to their companies, may not have access to a lot of the resources that my prior firm brought or
Right.
could bring to them. Very successful, but as I was based here in Dallas. The boutique was based in the Northeast, and as I got to build out a little bit of the market relationships here, getting to know the private equity and family office investors and lenders that are based here, I really heard a common theme, which is that they often prefer to do and support, invest in companies that were based here. The story being, gosh, our LPs, our families, we all made our wealth here. We would love to continue to support the companies that are, again, our neighbors and in our community here in Texas.
Right.
Broadly speaking, our community being here in Texas and to some extent surrounding states, because they would transact a lot in Texas. So I thought, gosh, I think there's a real opportunity to support that kind of strategy, but I really wanted to go down market from where I was, where they were focused on the $10 to $20 million EBITDA companies. I thought that there was a universe, a very underserved one, slightly smaller than that. So that's why the $2 to $7 million EBITDA company was really the foundation of what we want to try to accomplish.
That's, it's. I think that you're in a great spot as far as businesses are concerned, because, there's just not a whole lot of groups like you out there chasing that. What is the largest challenge that you face, and what's the largest challenge that these companies that you're representing face? So
I think that our largest challenge is really earning trust. Mm-hmm. And I think that based on our experience and what we can help them accomplish, I think we get it. I think our challenge is really helping to help founders and shareholders understand what we can do for them. In other words, earning the right to be an advisor to them in a potential process. And I think that the approach that makes sense is just learning about what it is that they want to do. Whether or not there's a transaction as a result is sort of secondary. The relationship for us is first.
Right.
And I think, and as a result, I think we can, if we're relationship focused, if we're focusing on what it is that they want to accomplish as individuals or as a family, the deals, I think that there's enough opportunity there, but you have to earn the right to be an advisor to them. And I think you do that by building the relationship. And whether or not, as I said, if there's a transaction, great. If not, great. We still have a relationship, and I think that's what we want to nurture. That's what we want to help enhance over time.
Right, and you never know where it's going to take you down the road.
Absolutely.
You never know who they might know that they could introduce you to. It's not too dissimilar from my business, being in the real estate business. Mm-hmm. I don't think my sales cycle is quite as long as what your sales cycle is. It's long, but I don't think it's that long. But as far as what we're always concerned about is building those solid relationships, because unfortunately, and I would imagine it's the same in your business, but in my business, there's been hundreds of years worth of my predecessors that have really killed the trust of the general public. And not to say that it wasn't warranted, but it's, to a certain extent, it's an education process that, sure. Look, it really is about the relationship, and we really do want to build a relationship and have that relationship. And we want to have especially if you're a boutique, we want to have that positive image and relationship out in the market. I mean, is that kind of what you see as well?
I think that's right, and I think that we certainly learn from, respect, and admire the pioneers or the larger firms in our industry that everybody reads about, that everybody knows. But given their scale, they just have to be focused on larger opportunities to make the economics work for them. We get that. Everybody gets that. But I think that what that does often overlook is the 5 to 7 to 10 to $20 million enterprise value company, great business, motivated employees and management team, but just not the right access to what a process might look like, or at least what the options might be. And I think that's where we try to layer ourselves and try to fit.
Now, I would imagine a lot of the pushback you're dealing with, founders that are, you said 30 years, so this is probably, 65 years old. Maybe he wants to pull some chips off the table, play golf, whatever. But I think the concern that a lot of business owners have is they've worked for 30 years, they've built this great business. What do they do? If they don't want to go play golf every day, what do they do? And I mean, is that something that you find people push back on?
Absolutely. I think that the founder of a business, even if it isn't 30 years, if it's any amount of time, someone has created value in a business that has employees, that delivers real opportunity for its own clients. But what then does the founder or the potential seller of that? What do they do if they don't have other life goals, which they certainly oftentimes they do? But if it's their empire and this is what they've created, that's a challenge. Is because as the new potential owner with ideas around how to grow, new customers, new geographies, if there's anything else, if there's any legacy left over, it's hard for the current employees to kind of break away from what they kind of knew, embrace the new ownership, and pursue the new strategy. It's
so how do you bridge that then?
Luckily, it's largely in the hands of the potential buyer for them to help figure out. But I think what we can offer in terms of any insights of how we, especially as we've gotten to know the seller of the business, is what's important. It's important that the employees are taken care of. It's a family that they've built, and these aren't very large companies, just as we've all talked about. And so in many cases, the employees that they've had for a number of years. They're family in many cases, literally family, but extended family because they're part of the business. And a legacy-focused seller is wanting to make sure that his employees or her employees are well taken care of. And so the right potential buyer is going to be sensitive to those issues and will have experience in managing through these kinds of legacy issues to help bridge from what was to then what the company can become. That's the quote unquote art of the potential transaction. But there are certainly ways that the potential buyer can think through to help manage the personalities that are involved in any deal.
So, businesses, like a lot of things, are kind of like a fine wine. There's a right time to pull the cork and enjoy it. Otherwise, it's just going to turn to vinegar. Do you see that resonates in businesses? And maybe it's a little bit different that the next person coming in can recognize that value and propel it or something. But, we talked about these legacy founders that don't feel, they have a fear of selling. Is it the right move for them to take some chips off the table? Is it not? What advice do you have for those type folks out there?
I don't know if it's advice, but a lot of times the potential sellers just may not know what the alternatives are. And I think that's what role we try to fill, is just help illustrate what the options are. It's not just sell or own. It can be a combination or a blend of your continued ownership and presence at the company, plus a new strategy, plus new capital. It can be a mix of all those things, but I think it all starts with helping to understand what the owner, what the seller wants to accomplish, what the market might support, and being realistic around what types of, how realistic his or her goals post-deal might be.
So as far as these groups that, or founders that want to pull some chips off the table and want to sell it, to a certain extent, and I'm speaking from what I know, which is the real estate aspect, a lot of times we say that people don't want you to call the baby ugly. They buy a building. To them, it's the most beautiful building ever. There might be a peak in the market where we say this is one of the most opportunistic times to sell this building, and they say, well, I've owned it forever. I have a concern. I don't want to get rid of this. And our strategy typically is, look, we need to recognize the value when and where we can, and we can always roll it into something else. There's always going to be other opportunities out there. So we may be able to go buy 2 or 3 buildings on top of this, or we may be able to go buy a building that's even better. Is it the same with businesses in that sometimes they need to just take some of the chips off the table and then they can go buy another business or maybe 2 more businesses?
Since we're not in the personal wealth or estate.
Okay, I'll put my disclaimer out right now. This is a commentary talk show,
right,
if you will.
I understand. Is it always wise to take risk off the table? It's always wise to consider, and I think what we try to illustrate and show is what attach a value to what they've created, attach a value, a market-supported value, a range of values that we believe might be supported in today's market for a portion or all or of their business, so that they can at least have some more information around, well, how much do I need, or how much should I take back, and what will my role be? I think that's what we're really in the business of, is in helping to demystify, if that's a word, the process, and illustrate again that word to show in tangible format, real numbers, to see what it is that the market might be willing to value the business at, and what percentage that he or she, the seller, might be able to retain. And I think that's what we help try to show, and as a result, it gives the shareholders that much more information to base that kind of decision on.
So are there 2 or 3 tips that you would give business owners that maybe aren't in the position to sell, or in the future would like to sell, of what to do or not do that would affect the valuation of their companies?
I think that if there's anything that we might that we run across that could be helpful, is think about your exit strategy as an actual strategy, just like owners and managers have created an operating strategy or a growth strategy. Well, what's the exit strategy? And it's not something that you can really put together really quickly. It's something that there's a lot of factors that go into, just like any other strategy for a business. There's a lot of factors that play into timing and opportunity, and certainly the overall market support for that kind of whatever strategy that might make sense. And so I think that not thinking about it is probably not helpful. But in thinking about, well, what does an exit or what does a recap look like, And I think that finding someone in the market who can help you look at those options, that's a, I guess, plug for somebody like us, but really someone whose business it is to help in those types of decision making, or at least illustrating those kinds of opportunities, and engaging someone who's in that business is probably helpful. It's really a free option. You don't have to pursue any of these options. It's just here's what they are. I think that what we would hope to do for our potential clients is help be the representative that they want to work with to help manage a process through. And I think, but our ultimate goal is not that. Our ultimate goal is the relationship. But I think that it starts with at least thinking about what a strategy might look like at the end.
It's kind of depressing, isn't it? Though it's kind of like talking about a will. It's like the exit strategy. The will's kind of like the exit strategy for your life. We're talking about the will/exit strategy.
Or it could be the most exciting day of all time, right?
Good point. Touche.
In this market, especially given where equity valuations are, and I'm sure you run into it, where interest rates are, and as I mentioned, all the available capital out there for middle market and lower middle market companies, it could be one of the most exciting days for the founder and his or her family.
Right.
I think the funniest story I've heard about just that is there was a company based in West Texas. This was in the I think 2008, 2009 time frame, when fracking here in Texas was certainly around, but becoming more and more part of the everyday conversation.
Sure.
There was a business that was part in that industry. They in the frac sand business, and I remember had a conversation with the ultimate buyer of that business. It was a family-owned business. They had it in their family for X number of years, but they tailgated the closing of the deal because they were getting the largest check, I think, that perhaps they had even imagined. But
I'm sorry, hold on.
Yep.
They tailgated?
They tailgated.
What do you mean they tailgated the closing?
So the
please tell me they'd show up to where they closed an attorney's office, a title office.
They closed at an attorney's office, and if I remember the story right, the family, not that many of them, but they were enough there. They were in the parking lot.
Oh, you are kidding me.
Sharing a few adult beverages among them all, and
okay,
waiting
were you
for the checks to
representing
clear.
this group?
No, this is just a
okay,
industry
so
story.
did somebody do a keg stand at this, or? Oh God, here it gets better.
Depending on what that, if you, I'm not going to say who all the parties were, but based on what I think that what I remember about the number that family got, everybody should have been celebrating in whatever creative way they could, because. But I think that what that illustrates is it can be the greatest day,
right.
For anybody who might be thinking about an exit.
Well, and it provides
exit.
for many generations at that point.
And absolutely, not that it's
a new beginning, not an exit strategy at that point.
Exactly.
Kicking it off with a keg stand.
Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. And I think that's
a great line. Don't cry because it's over. Smile because
it happened.
All right, I'm gonna have to make a note of
that
one.
Note that one. I'm sure I found that on a cereal box somewhere. I keep hitting the table and making a loud bass noise.
So if people, we have kind of a two-part in this deal.
Mm-hmm.
If people want to get a hold of you, before I get you out of the hot seat and ask you about some different current events.
Sure.
Actually, I'm going to back up one.
Okay.
Interest rates. How is that? Obviously, it's not a good thing or is it a good thing for this? How is that affecting what you do in that market, in that space?
Well, if you think about the buyout markets in general, not largely driven by, but help enabled and supported by a low interest rate environment. Why? It's the larger middle market deals or any middle market, any size company, the buyer is going to pay a portion of the price in like a house, down payment, in cash, and then I'll borrow the rest. I think that in this environment, we're seeing a lot of lenders being aggressive in terms of how much leverage they're willing to put on an opportunity, covenants that they will require the companies adhere to. So a lot of loosening, not everywhere, but certainly hear about it anecdotally more than not. And I think that as a result, it allows potential buyers to pay maybe a little bit more, or for sellers to realize a little bit more value, simply because of the interest rate environment. Still, people are being somewhat more, maybe not everyone would agree, sane in terms of the types of deals that they're getting involved in. But from what we hear, there's certainly a lot of the fundamentals are positive in terms of the available capital to buy and sell and trade in companies. But what we also hear is there's not a lot of activity. There's certainly a lot of activity. The question always is, are there a lot of great assets out there? And I think people are being choosy.
Okay. So if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Easiest way, our website, our contact information is there. It's HarloKyn, HarloKyn, LLC.com. There's a contact page in there. We take every phone call, we answer every email, and we'll look forward to
service. You're offering service that no one else offers right there.
Well, we at least want to have the conversation, and we're willing to open to all kinds of conversations, and we're certainly look forward to as a result, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk a little bit more about what we do.
So I got one last question for you before we close out.
Sure.
And, today is a historic day. It is George H.W. Bush's birthday, but it also happens to be the Kim-Trump summit.
Right.
There's been a lot of talk about North Korea, people making speculative bets on even the DMZ, land in the DMZ.
Wow.
In honor of this historic day, are there any business plays that people should be looking at or that you're looking at that are in conjunction with opportunistic growth that could happen in that area?
Well, I think that if you are in the business of building nuclear fallout shelters, you're probably not as strong as you were 2 days ago.
God, I got to sell that business fast.
Right. Concrete bunkers, perhaps.
Good, because concrete's getting expensive.
It is, and rebar.
Rebar.
As
19% since the beginning of the year.
But tough to say what might be a great denuclearization play. But I think what that does perhaps remove, or at least start to remove, is a little bit of that geopolitical global risk. Not to say that it won't prop up somewhere else, but at least that one looks like it's been put in a smaller box to understand better how it
been
all
put in the box on Outside the Box, the show.
See, I tried to.
Golly, look at those
in.
puns. He's so punny.
That might be a great place to end, right there on the pun.
All righty, great.
Drop the mic.
Well, Biegel, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you coming on today and enlightening us. I know for me it was a great show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm your host, Grant Pruitt, signing off.
You're listening to RMCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.